one of the topics that some people are talking about when it comes to the PS5 and the Xbox Series S and the X is backwards compatibility. And even though I do think it's beautiful that we can bring these classic games to newer generations in 4K, 60 FPS, especially when it comes to the S and the X, what if the game looks visually stunning, but the gameplay mechanics don't quite hold up? And I feel like in the previous generation, so talking about the PS4 and the Xbox One, maybe that transition is not as obvious. But what about going back to something like the PlayStation 1 and the PlayStation 2? There's a lot of games in there that I love. I don't think they 100% hold up, and I would not be opposed to them receiving something like a remake. I'm not talking about a remaster. A remaster can be something like the Shadow of the Colossus collection, which included Ico and Shadow on the PS3. And that collection took two classic games from the PS2 and it upscaled them, it smoothened out some of the frame rate, but it was still using the original assets. Hey everybody, Juan here, welcome back. Get ready because I'm not going to be talking about remasters. I'm going to be talking about games that I want to see get a full-on remake, while also talking about some of the remakes that I personally enjoyed. So if you like what I do, please consider subscribing, clicking on that bell, going down to the comment section, and don't be afraid, people, I won't tell. Which are some games that you love, but you would not mind seeing a few things be changed up? And I feel like for us to have a healthy conversation about this, I want to quickly bring up 3 remakes that I have personally loved. The first one, I've made a video about it, is the Resident Evil 2 remake. They took the essence and the characters and the story of Resident Evil 2, but they changed it from the pre-rendered backgrounds. It became a third-person shooter, but I love that game. I even went back and played it again a couple of months ago. It's still incredible. Another one that I have here is a Crash Team Racing Nitro fueled. So as opposed to something like the Resident Evil 2 remake where they changed the gameplay, here, a lot of it is the same as the PS1 game, but they also ported over levels from PS2, and obviously the game is just beautiful and gorgeous to look at. And I feel it's almost like a modern greatest hits, where they take the classic game, but they didn't stop there, and they eventually included some like microtransactions and not so great things, I think, but I never really focused on that too much. But the actual gameplay and the visual presentation is outstanding. And then we have other types of remakes that really change almost nothing about the gameplay, and they compile things up. So we have here Spyro the Reignited Trilogy. I actually finally went back and beat the first Spyro game in this collection a couple of months ago, so maybe later I can do a somewhat more full-length review about it. But I think it's a visually stunning collection. The fact that I was playing this on my regular PS4, and as I kept playing the game, I thought to myself, man, this is probably what I thought the game looked like when I was a kid. Because as a kid, you're not really thinking about the 3D graphics so much. I remember getting Spyro 1 on the PS1, even playing the demo and thinking, man, graphics cannot get any better. And I love the fact that they were pretty faithful with this. Same thing with the Crash Insane Trilogy. And I wanted to include those 3 games in this video because I know that when we talk about remakes, some people can be very faithful, like change the visual presentation but don't change the gameplay. And as you can see, I'm not opposed to that. As long as it's good, I'm willing to make a sacrifice, because if I want to play the original game, I still have it, right? I just want to be perfectly clear that this is a very personal list. I will be very shocked if some of these games ever get any kind of remake, but isn't it fun to dream, right? We're going to be going back to the PlayStation 1. This is Legend of Legaia. It came out in 1998, and this is a Japanese role-playing game. And my favorite thing about this game has got to be the combat mechanics, because if you've played something like Xenogears, then maybe you've had an experience with something kind of like it, but as opposed to just choosing an attack, it almost feels like a fighting game because you have to figure out a specific button combination. So maybe up, down, left does a special attack. And as you level up, you can begin to combine different attacks. So you're doing an uppercut, but then you're doing a somersault. And then throughout the adventure, you can absorb some creatures. So it's kind of like a Pokemon game, like not really, but I love being able to punch things and then being able to absorb them. The reason that I would love to see this game get a remake is that as much as I love it, I love the characters, I love the world, I feel like the overworld, the way the story is told, is a little bit slower than maybe we're used to around the time of the PS1. Think about 1998. I mean, we're talking about one of my personal golden ages of PS1 games, RPGs, and everything. And here, you have a game that's very mechanically sound. The characters, as visually cool as they can look, they are somewhat forgettable. So I'd flesh out the characters a little bit more, keep the actual combat mechanic, but change the pacing and maybe the way things actually unfold. Now, staying on the topic of PS1 games, let's go to 1997, and I would love to see a remake of Megaman Legends. A lot of people don't know about these games. We actually got two of them. There's Megaman Legends, Legends 2. I barely played any of the original Megaman games. I played the Battle Network games on the Game Boy Advance. One day, I looked at the back of the box, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. There's like a 3D Megaman. I heard that this game had voiceover, and I went into it and I love the game. But here's the thing. The presentation, excellent. Soundtrack, top notch. Most of the gameplay is pretty good, but this game came out before analog sticks were a common occurrence, so the camera and the character movement is very, very stiff. I will leave a lot of the things like the world, the soundtrack. The voiceover is actually not awful, but obviously they would redo it.
Hey, you! Thanks to you, everything's a mess now, isn't it?
Huh? Aren't you the girl who's being chased by that dog?
I don't think it's ever going to happen because we almost got Mega Man Legends 3 and Capcom just kind of said like no, but these games are actually going up in price. I thought it was like a $10 or something. I think this is going for over $40, but I do think that it is time that Capcom revisit Mega Man in a non-traditional sense. Like we've had, more recent Mega Man games that they kind of take the original elements but give it a new twist or something like that, and I think that's awesome. But you also have this, so Capcom, get to work. Now for this next game that I would love to see get a remake, I don't have a physical copy, but we are going to go back to 1992 because I feel like in a time where we are celebrating the Super Mario games, the 3D games, for some reason, a lot of people just don't talk about the Game Boy games, and I feel like the first Super Mario Land, it's okay. It's not a bad game, but it's nothing that I really think anybody should go out of their way to play. But Super Mario Land 2, people, holy crap. I remember playing that game on my red Game Boy, which, that's me. I'm just gonna let that sink in for a second. And now, let's keep talking about Super Mario Land 2. I would love to see this game get some kind of treatment like a Link's Awakening. I wasn't a big fan of that art style, but taking this game and not, please don't have it look like the new Super Mario Brothers games. No offense, but I hate how those games look. But I would love to see this game get a fresh coat of paint and keep things relatively simple. Maybe you include the levels or even the original ROM for the first game, right? It's like, hey, play the remake to Super Mario Land 2, you beat it, you get the original game, and maybe even the original version of Super Mario Land 2. As I keep talking about the game and I remember that I shared that picture, I'm just reminiscing about the music, the graphics. I just could not believe that I was playing a full-fledged Mario game on my handheld device, and more often than not, I kind of like that version more. So if you would love to see Super Mario Land 2 or maybe both get some kind of remake treatment, let me know because I can't be the only person thinking about that. And now let's go back to the PlayStation 2, and afterwards I am going to bring up a couple of honorable mentions or picks that all of you have that you left me at the Discord at castofthepast.com/Discord. Usually that is part of my retro gaming podcast, but we do have a PlayerJuan channel, so you can check that out right there. And we have to talk about Mary-Kate and Ashley Sweet 16 License to Drive. I feel like when we're talking about Mario Party, this game is never part of the conversation, and I just don't get it because people just love to discriminate. The fact that this game, you have two of the best people in television history. No, let's actually talk about these right here. TimeSplitters, 1, 2, 3. I feel like in this topic of games that deserve remakes, sure, you could make the case for Sweet 16 License to Drive, not a super awful game. These games do get brought up often. Let's be real, the first one, totally forgettable, these two games. Wow, I don't remember how I got access to these games or how I knew about them. I just looked at the covers and somebody told me at the, I think it was EB Games, oh, if you like GoldenEye, you should get this game. And I'm like, okay, I guess I gotta buy that game. So I love how I just answered my question of like, I don't know how I got it. Oh yeah, it was totally at the game store, but the style, the graphics, the gameplay, the story, the amount of support for the multiplayer part of the game is just incredible. The name's TimeSplitters, so as you can assume, you travel through time. The game does an incredible job at just getting you acclimated to different periods throughout history, but it's very tongue-in-cheek. It never takes itself too seriously, and I feel like a lot of people have more positive things to say about TimeSplitters 2, more so than Future Perfect, but this one actually had online. These games had level creators for the multiplayer stuff. They're not bad to play now, but let's not forget that the PS2, even though we did have a lot of solid first-person shooters, we were still figuring out the analog sticks, and I feel like this game, it's a little bit too floaty in the movement. Same thing with GoldenEye. As much as I love GoldenEye, playing GoldenEye now, some people maybe have no problem doing it, but for me, I had even tried emulating it. I even bought an N64 USB controller, and honestly, it was very difficult. And I feel like these games have an incredible story. The amount of characters you can unlock for multiplayer was just insane, people. And there have been a ton of petitions online, polls, and a lot of people just asking, like, is there any way we can celebrate these games in modern times? If there was a modern take, I would change it to a more standard first-person shooter, but keeping everything else the same. I would just change the way the movement is handled. If you want to play the original ones, they are by no means bad, and you can also play most of them on the GameCube and the Xbox. Why am I doing this? Am I like Spider-Man? That, or I guess Too Sweet Me or something like that. And now I want to bring up a couple of different games that all of you sent on the Discord, starting with Sir Meatwad, which he would love to see Parasite Eve from the PlayStation 1 get some kind of remake. And I think I've talked about this in a very old video. I actually bought a physical copy of Parasite Eve years after it came out. I want to say we were multiple years into the PS2. I went into a store, bought it, went home, it didn't work, and I never played it. And that game plays a lot like the Resident Evil games. It's got that pre-rendered background stuff. I think it does have tank controls. I've never played them. I've recently been playing through games like Silent Hill 1. I beat Silent Hill 2 last year. I've beaten the original RE2 and 3. Maybe it's worth going back to this game because honestly, I'm not exactly minding. I'm not having a big problem with tank controls, but that's a game he would love to see. And then Ryan McNulty, fellow podcast co-host from A Cast to the Past, he's also got a pretty sexy channel now on YouTube with 2 videos up as of this video talking about the Banjo-Kazooie hub world and why he thinks Zelda 2 is a good game. Description for the link to his channel. And his list of games include Silent Hill 1, which I'm playing through it right now, as I mentioned, and I would not be opposed to that whatsoever. There's been a lot of rumors about that, especially within the past couple of years. Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, I guess the more recent versions, and these would be remasters, would be the ones that we got on the Rare Replay. He's also talking about the Zelda Oracle game. So those are 2 games that came out on the Game Boy Color. So kind of like the Pokemon games, so it's like Red and Blue. It's like Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, I think. 2 games that I think a lot of people have been begging for is Grand Theft Auto, Vice City, and San Andreas. The gameplay you're looking at right now is of Grand Theft Auto 3 from when I beat it a couple of years ago. The games did not get a lot better graphically. GTA 4 got a little bit better. I was not a big fan of how it looks still. I think GTA 5 looks stunning, and Red Dead Redemption, I mean, yeah, who can say anything negative about that game visually, right? But imagine Vice City with that vivid color, the 80s theme. And something like San Andreas, like riding a bicycle and having all of that surrounding area looking glorious, man. That would be a badass game or series of games to see get a full-on remake. Rockstar, they'll probably just make a like a GTA Online expansion or something. Internet Tough Guy writes, I think the Breath of Fire series and Final Fantasy Tactics could use a remake or reimagining. Honestly, I would make do for a Final Fantasy Tactics port on the Switch because you've ported everything elsewhere. Is it really that hard to save? Oh, that's it. They're saving the best for last. He also talks about other games including the long-rumored MGS remake and the Soul Reaver and Blood Omen games. Those last 2 games are some that I always looked at the box art and thought to myself, man, that looks pretty cool, but I never played them. Now, Justin Boyanin, he would love developers to go all the way back to something like Atari games, with Pitfall being one of the prime examples. And I think they kind of tried to remake those games, but it was in a time period where maybe just the whole retro gaming scene wasn't as vivid as it is now. Amy XOXO wrote, I would like to see a Wii Sports game remake for the Switch. That's actually something that I'm very surprised by, because I think we all expected to have a Wii Sports-like game with the launch of the Switch, but instead we got that 1-2 Switch game, which I never bought because many people said it's cool, but not really what we were looking for. We have had a ton of sports games, but I think nothing will capture that magic that we had with Wii Sports. And Wily Jedi, or the GBA Jedi, wrote, I still want the full Legend of Dragoon remake. That's my second one after Final Fantasy VIII. Legend of Dragoon is one of those RPGs that even back then when I was full in on RPG games, I never picked it up. And in hindsight, I definitely should have, but at least I do have a digital copy on my PS3. This is something we could talk about for hours, especially when I'm streaming. We inevitably fall into this conversation as we play a lot of games, because whenever I stream at twitch.tv/MrPlayerJuan, I play a lot of PS2, PS3 games. I've gone back and played PS1 demos, so I really would love to see everybody just go down to the comments section, fill that section up with your list, and maybe I can eventually take a look at some of those games, or we can even do a part 2 about this topic in the future. And if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, clicking on that bell, and I also have a Let's Play channel at youtube.com/PlayerJuanPlays. So here I'm more about the conversation, bringing up a topic, and I compile videos and all of that for everybody to see. Sometimes it's a highlight of a Twitch stream, and I bring the great conversations that we had live over there, or I'm playing a game and I'm like, man, that's pretty good, and I just sit down, record, publish, and everybody can hopefully enjoy that. So up until next time, thank you for watching and supporting, and take care, everybody.